when you talk of margin of safety generally, you are talking of how can you manage your risk? Because you have a budget. Yeah. But will your budget be the same as actual? Never. It's never going to be. Never. Very unlikely. Let me put it that way. Right. And your objective is always to make profit. Yeah. In this paper, you want to be profitable. Your margin of safety is just checking how much cushion do you have? How much safety do you have? How much space do you have from what you have budgeted to a point where you are not making profit? So what we are saying in performance management is that how much excess revenue do we have over the break-even point for us to stay positive? That is, for us to stay making profit. So you are just checking, just like Alaji said, we have done a budget revenue. Yeah. Let's say we want to make 10,000 revenue. Then we'll be asking ourselves, this 10,000, at what point will it stop giving us profit? That means we need to know how much excess do we have over the break-even point. So the question is, for this revenue that is 10,000, what is the break-even revenue? So if you calculate your break-even revenue, which means at what revenue are you going to break even? Let's say it's 9,500. What's your margin of safety? How safe are you before you start making loss? Your margin of safety is just 10,000 minus 9,500. And that is $500. So you are saying that if your budget is $10,000 revenue and your break-even revenue is 9,500, it means you only have an allowance of $500. So which means if your cost that you have budgeted increases by $600, you turn to from a positive position to a negative position. From being a profit-making plan, you turn to a negative, which is a loss-making. So your margin of safety is just a risk measure of how quickly can you go from a budgeted profit to a budgeted loss, to an actual loss rather. So what I'm saying is this is a risk management tool. And as you can see it, because you want to know how comfortable are you with being profitable based on your budget. So your margin of safety is a risk management tool that measures how quickly can a company go from budgeted profit position to a loss position. That's what we're saying. So if you have, let's say, budget again, and break-even point, yeah. Still testing the concept with you. If the budget revenue, say, is 40,000, and you are breaking even at 15,000. Or let's say if it is, so scenario 1, scenario 2, 50,000, 35,000, 100,000, scenario 3, 48,000. What are the margin of safety in these scenarios? Yeah.
Is it 25,000?
25,000. Scenario 2?
15,000.
Thank you, 15,000. Scenario 3?
52,000.
52,000. So if you had to choose which of these investments should you do, which one would you do out of the three, or rank them? Which one is the best?
The 52.
52. And this is second. And this is third. And why are you choosing 52? You're choosing 52 because you have so much allowance to still being profitable. So even if cost is dancing up and down, you have a lot of cushion to withstand whatever changes will happen, because your budget will never be equal to your actual. Things will move around. But the question is, how much cushion, how much allowance do you have to be able to withstand those changes? A lot of them might not be favorable. So do you have so much cushion in your plan such that you can still stay profitable? That is what your margin of safety is trying to address. And that is why, in terms of formula, which you always see, yeah, you understand it, but the formula is always equals to your budget units. You can calculate it in units. You can calculate margin of safety in units. So if you want to know the safety in units, it will be your budgeted units minus your break-even units. Yeah, and you can as well calculate it in percentage. Yeah, if you want to calculate it in percentage, that will be your margin of safety units divided by my margin of safety in percentage will be what percentage of that budgeted unit do I have as a safety cushion, right? So it has to be divided by budgeted units. Sorry. Thanks for bringing that up. Makes sense. That's why it's good to stay tuned. Right. Yeah, so please correct that percentage formula. Yeah, because remember, the question we are trying to ask is how can we move from a budgeted position that is profit to a loss position? So which means we always have a budget first. So if I've done a budget of 2,000 units, the questions I'm asking is, okay, out of those 2,000 units, how much excess do I have? I get that as units. But if I want to do it in percentage, then I'm asking what percentage of my budgeted unit is safe, right? So how much percentage cushion do I have? So it has to be divided by that budgeted unit. Yeah. So back to the question, let's say 100,000 for fixed cost. And we have budgeted sales unit to be 16,000. So break-even point, I want you to do it for me in units, in percentage, and in revenue. Break-even units, we already said from what we know, it's just what unit do we need to sell to make our contribution to be equal to fixed cost. So our fixed cost is 100,000. So which means that if you divide that by the contribution per unit, our contribution per unit is 50 minus 30. So that is 20K. 20 actually. And that equals to 5,000 units. So in terms of units, our margin of safety will be equals to budgeted units, which is 16,000 minus 5,000. And that's how we got 11,000. In terms of percentage, that is just dividing this by the budgets of 16,000. I believe that's 69%. And revenue times, it's just your margin of safety in units multiplied by selling price. So that's our 5, what do we have? 11,000. Selling price is 50. And that's 550. And if we want to test it with the long formula, we can also test with a long formula. Budget revenue minus break-even revenue. What's break-even revenue? What's break-even revenue? How much?
5,000.
Revenue, not units.
Will it be 250,000?
That'll be 5,000 multiplied by
50?
50.
Yeah, that gives it 250.
That'll be 250K. So that's break-even revenue. And what's budget revenue? That's budget units of 16,000 times 50. What's that?
800. 800.
So that's 800K minus 250K. That's 550K. It's too long. I don't like the method, and that's why I'd rather give you this formula. You won't see it in your literature, but please, this works for you easy. Now, what I want us to do is still on single profit. However, we want to look at it in terms of revenue. We've been looking at activity in terms of sales units, right? Now we want to look at revenue. The same thing, but in revenue terms. So which means we'll be asking the same question of how much revenue do we have to make to break even? And how much revenue do we have to make to achieve a targeted profit? And like I said, it's still going to be understanding, because as you've even seen, formulas, you can make mistake writing formulas, memorizing formulas. I hate it. So as much as you can avoid it, please avoid it. Start building that skill that you are probing into formulas to know why is this formula like this, such that you can create it yourself, right? So, and we're not going to do anything extraordinary. We're still going to build on that understanding that you had on contribution per unit. But instead of using contribution per unit that we used the last time, guess what we're going to be using here? Contribution per revenue. Right? So instead of using contribution per unit, what we'll be doing is contribution per revenue. That is what we'll be using. We're not going to be using contribution per unit again. Because when we're doing number of units to break even or number of units to make a profit, we're calculating number of units. But now we want to calculate revenue, and in that case, we're going to be using contribution per revenue as well. So which means at break even, what we are saying is that at break even, our contribution per revenue will be equals to what? It's the same thing, because at break-even, contribution is equals to fixed cost. This is already equals to this, it's the same thing already. So contribution per revenue is the same thing as fixed cost per revenue. And it's the same concept we're going to be using here. So if that is the case, and we had this question earlier on, so tell me, revenue per unit is $50. That's selling price per unit. Contribution is $20. We already have it. So which means contribution per revenue is what? Quickly. What's contribution per revenue? Contribution is 0.4.
Yeah. Contribution is 20 and revenue is 50.
Exactly. Because contribution is $20 and revenue is $50. Yeah, it's here in our scenario. This is selling price per unit, revenue per unit. And contribution is 50 minus 30. Yeah. Selling price minus variable cost. That's $20. So contribution per revenue is equals to 0.4. And if that is the case, that means our fixed cost per revenue is equals to 0.4. So you are saying that you need 0.4 fixed cost to make one revenue, $1 of revenue. That's what it means. If 0.4 is equals to fixed cost per revenue. So which means one revenue will give you 0.4 fixed cost. $1 revenue. So you're saying $1 will give you 0.4 fixed cost. So if this is revenue, $1 revenue is giving you a fixed cost of 0.4. And what is the fixed cost that you have in this question? We have 100,000. So the question is, what revenue will give you 100,000 fixed cost? And we'll do the same multiplication that we've been doing. 1 multiplied by 100,000, then divided by 0.4. And that is equals to what?
250,000.
250,000. Which is the same thing as what you did here. Look at it. Because you did it here. But just that some questions you might not have all this information available. And how do you go about it? It's still going to give you the same thing. When you have a good understanding of PM, there are almost 1 million ways of doing things. You must know how variables are linked together because your knowledge of mathematics is very critical. But you can see the same thing. Now you have your this is your break-even revenue. Because at this revenue of 250,000, your variable cost will be what? For you to have 250,000, how many units have you sold? For you to make revenue of 250,000, you must have sold, because price is, how much is the price? $50. So you must have sold 5,000 units. Yeah. So variable cost will be 5,000 multiplied by 30. Right? Because variable cost per unit is $30. I'm just walking back to show you again. Yeah. It's not like you have to do this. And that will be $150,000. So variable cost is $150,000. And you know that your fixed cost is $100,000. So which means your total cost is equal to $250,000. And you can see that is your break-even revenue that you have here. So at this point, they are equal. And if they are equal, what is your profit? When your revenue equals to your total cost, then profit equals to 0. That is why you are broken even. The same scenario we can use to get a target profit. And like I always say, the same understanding is what we're building on. So it's not going to be anything different. The only difference is just that we are using revenue instead of units. So we were targeting fixed cost of 100,000 before to break even. But when we have a target profit, yeah, let's say we have a target profit of, we want to make a target profit of, how much do you want to make? Let's say we want to make additional profit of 50,000. Instead of breaking even, we want to make 50,000 profits targeted. Then the question is, how much revenue do we have to make for us to achieve this profit? I know it's easy. You can just say, yeah, why don't you just add 50 to that 250,000? Yeah. But please, let's use the understanding, the same formula we've been using, yeah? Which, what you say here, instead of using 100,000 here, you want more than this fixed cost of 100,000, right? So you want 150,000. So you've already said that $1 of revenue is equivalent to fixed cost of 0.4. But now you don't want just fixed cost. You want a fixed cost plus, and that is 150,000. Well, let me break it down. 100,000 plus 50,000. So that's 150,000. So $1 of revenue is equivalent to 0.4 of fixed cost. But now you want 150,000. And that will be 150,000 multiplied by 1 divided by 0.4. And what will that give us?
$375.
I have 375. Well, let's see. If you have 375, do we have that profit of 50K? If you are going to make revenue of 375, how many units do you need to sell to make a revenue of 375? 375 divided by 50, because your selling price is $50, right?
7,500.
7,500. So you must have sold 7,500 units, right? And if you're selling 7,500 units, what's your variable cost? That's 7,500 multiplied by 30. Fixed cost is still 100,000. What is this one? What's variable cost total?
225.
225,000. So which means our total cost is equals to 325,000. So revenue minus total cost is equals to profit. So which means 375,000 minus 325,000. What's our profit? 50,000. So can you see why you cannot just add simple addition to your break-even? Because there's more than one variable that's driving your profit. There's a fixed cost involved. There's an activity-driven variable cost involved. So a simple addition will not work. And that's why you need to understand that concept. Yeah. Which, if you want to use formula, like you always see it in your books, right? All of them are formulas from target profits to fixed cost to break-even point. So for formula lovers, your break-even revenue is equals to your fixed cost divided by contribution per sales ratio. And for targeted profit, yeah, your revenue will be equals to fixed cost plus targeted profit divided by contribution to sales ratio. You can see how many formulas we've been writing. There's no way you won't mix those formulas up if you are just going by memorizing them. But even if you want to memorize now, with the understanding that you have, you should be in a better place, yeah, to avoid confusion, right? So now that is it with single product.